we've extended our boundaries and laid the foundations for the new communities. Many houses have been built. Our record is one of the best in the country. But many, many more are still needed.
So this was after the First World War. There was a piece of legislation nationally that the government passed, and that was when kind of council houses first started to come into effect.
Yeah, that's right. So 1919, the Addison Act, was the first time that local, well, it was government money to local authorities, and local authorities were asked to provide housing. I mean, there was a number of factors pushing that. It was post-war, so there was a speech by Lloyd George where he talked about creating a country fit for heroes to live in, and that's kind of been sort of corrupted into homes for heroes idea. Obviously, there are lots of servicemen returning from war, needing a better quality of life. I mean, it's been argued that also by building these houses, it was a way of averting possible revolutionary thoughts because we'd seen what would happen in 1917 in Russia, and so by providing better housing, it was a way of perhaps placating the working classes in England. That's a possible argument as well. And so 1919, the Act was passed. I think what's interesting, it was passed by the Health Minister, and so housing was considered very much part of the health policy, and that was the other factor that housing was. They knew that poor housing was impacting on the health of people, which it was very apparent with men signing up to join in the army with health issues.
There's a lot of constituents in different types of housing, some now more predominantly privately owned, not owned by the council anymore, but where the stock gets a bit old and people have to suffer with poor ventilation, poor heating, damp, problems in the houses, and a need for that investment to kind of update the stock.
Yeah, it's exactly the same issues. And so there was the whole swathe of house building across the country, but Bristol was really important. It was once some of the very first estates were built. So the first one in Bristol was the Hillfields estate in Fishponds, 1919, but very soon after that, also in 1919, Sea Mills estate. And they're both, that would be considered homes for heroes estates. And they are both, not just nationally, I think internationally significant estates. I mean, I say that, we know the Hillfields estate, there are at least 20 different styles, probably more different styles of houses on that estate. There are competitions for architects to design new housing, but we know that they had visitors from overseas, from Europe, but also from, at that point, other countries in the Empire, South Africa, Canada, New Zealand, looking at the styles of houses being built and to take those ideas elsewhere. So it is a very significant place.
And do you find that when you're talking to children in local schools, the kind of history of the identity of their community is still understood by them? So when we did our village hall in Sea Mills, for example, we've called them all village halls slightly provocatively to see whether some areas think of themselves as villages or not. And people in Sea Mills said they didn't see themselves as a village, they saw themselves as a garden suburb. And the Homes for Heroes kind of narrative is still quite strongly felt by people there today.
Yeah, and that's really important. That's what we really want to make sure the children do understand, because the key aim of the Heritage Schools programme is about giving children pride in where they live. And so living in Sea Mills, we could be taking them into the centre of Bristol, looking at the history of the docks and everything like that, which is fine, but actually taking them for a walk around Sea Mills and understanding why that suburb was built like that is really impactful on their understanding of where they live and their sense of community where they live. So it's really good to hear that people still call it a garden suburb or understand that it's a Home for Heroes estate and that it is historically very important.